When John Brown was 12 years old, he saw a young slave, a friend of his, being beaten. That moment changed John Brown forever. It drove him to find a way to end slavery no matter what the consequence. The United States, in the 1850s, was facing a life-changing choice. The American citizens were divided among people who supported slavery and those who didn't. It was a troubling time that was about to be heavily impacted by one man. John Brown fathered 20 children with 2 wives. 11 of his children reached adulthood. Several of his sons fought with him in Kansas and Harper's Ferry. 3 of them died while assisting him. John Brown wrote many letters to his wife and children when he was in prison. But why would a father, a friend, someone supporting a great cause, end up in prison? Well, John Brown believed in action, but not everybody believed in his actions. At the age of 47, John Brown first revealed his plan to have a slave revolt in the South. He revealed this information to Frederick Douglass, a famous African-American abolitionist. He wanted to pick 25 men to go to plantations, liberate slaves, and form a colony of blacks. Then he planned to invade Harper's Ferry, the largest weapon arsenal in the South. 7 years later, he began recruiting men for his attack on Harper's Ferry. But the attack on Harper's Ferry may never have happened without the help of 6 men: Franklin Sanborn, Gerrit Smith, George Luther Stearns, Dr. Samuel Gridley Howe, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, and Theodore Parker were these men, who eventually became known under the title of the Secret Six. Of these men, John Brown asked $1,000. He told them it was for the most important undertaking of his whole life. He called it Underground Railroad business on a somewhat extended scale. So the men who supported Brown's cause funded his attack. With the raid close at hand, John Brown began to get anxious. Talk was just talk, he complained. What we need is action. That, he said, will free the slaves. On July 3rd, 1859, his revolution began. He found a farm to rent near Harper's Ferry where he could train his soldiers. For 2 months, more participants arrived while weapons were gathered and strategies discussed. Finally, on October 15th, Brown announced it was time for the revolution to begin. Brown decided to take 18 men with him to secure the arsenal. He assigned the other 3 men to take stolen weapons to slaves. Early on in the raid, things ran pretty smoothly. Brown and his men successfully took the arsenal. Then Brown waited. He waited for slaves to hear of the revolt and leave their masters. But the slaves did not respond as he anticipated. Many slaves were confused and scared. They didn't understand why a white man would come to their aid. John Brown ignored warnings to escape while there was still time. He was sure the slaves would realize what was happening. The arsenal was soon surrounded by soldiers, and there was no way out. The commander of the Marines, Robert E. Lee, sent a lieutenant to demand a formal surrender. Brown refused. The Marines forced their way into the arsenal and killed many of Brown's men. John Brown was stabbed in the confusion. He and 4 of his men were taken prisoner. After capture, Brown was questioned. He said he was disappointed in the failed attack. Following the capture of John Brown, Northerners got angry. They called Brown a martyr and called meetings to order. The Northerners believed it was treason to hang someone who, from their perspective, was doing good. Meanwhile, in the South, people were excited. John Brown had been captured. John Brown will be put on trial. John Brown saw no reason for a trial. He informed the judge, "If you want my blood, you can have it at any moment without the mockery of a trial." The judge didn't care and set a court date. On October 26th, the trial began. John Brown lay injured on a cot during the trial. He pled not guilty to the charges. After many witnesses and accounts of the events, the judge asked Brown if he wished to say anything before the sentence. He immediately rose and gave his address to the court. He said, "I believe that to have interfered as I have done, in behalf of his despised poor is no wrong but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood farther with the blood of my children and the blood of millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I say, let it be done." Afterwards, Brown was sentenced to be hanged on December 2nd. John Brown's hanging was closed to the public. Only a few reporters, volunteers, and soldiers attended. One young man attended who believed Brown was a terrible traitor. That young man was John Wilkes Booth. Booth's anti-abolitionist beliefs would later play a part in his assassination of President Lincoln. John Brown sparked a revolution that began with a child witnessing a common act of cruelty.